slowly trickling in.
Perhaps I say. Welcome those that are joining. We've stopped people joining still. We're waiting a couple of minutes. So again, welcome those joining. We're waiting just a minute or two more till we start. Okay, welcome everybody. So this is a SEDA webinar on digital, Dr. Sodpark now. This is digital financial interventions in humanitarian settings, an adaptive randomized controlled trial from Ethiopia. This is SEDA and the work which is being reported here, and this webinar is supported by UK Aid from FCDO, so thank you to them for that. At the end of the webinar, there will be, when you finish the webinar, a link should come up, which is a short survey form that you can please fill in on how satisfied you are or what you've learned. I actually don't know what's in the survey, I should know. But basically it's an exit survey for this webinar, and FCDO are really very keen that we report the findings from those surveys. So you are doing us a big favor, please, if you would take the time to fill that in. So thank you for that. And so on to the topic again, so financial interventions, digital interventions in humanitarian settings. There's a growing, small but growing literature on economic intervention in humanitarian settings. And this is a very small cluster within SEDA. We have a couple of studies in this area. We did have one other one, but it got dropped when we had the cuts a couple of years ago. We had to drop one of them, but we still have two, so that's very good. And this is the first of those we're presenting in the webinar series. And so we have Getachew Amente from DAI, Development Alternatives Inc. in Washington, and actually I don't know if you're watching in Ethiopia. Maybe you're in Ethiopia, yes. Okay, and Alan, who also knows Ethiopia, from IFPRI, who's currently in Ethiopia as well. So I believe Getachew is going to start the presentation. So take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Howard. I have a small presentation to share. I hope it's there, right?
We can see it. It's not in slide share mode yet.
Yeah, coming.
That's it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much once again. So I'm just presenting a very brief highlight on the digital financial service expansion that we've been doing in the last 2.5 years, mainly partnering with local commercial bank and a fintech's provider, technology provider. So very briefly, SHARPE is standing for strengthening and host and refugee populations economies, and it is basically established to support the implementation of CRRF as Ethiopia is one of the signatories to the Global Compact of Refugees. So basically, SHARPE is a joint project working on both strengthening market system for refugees and their host communities. And as Howard just said, it is funded by FCDO. It's basically a 3.5 years program. It was launched in September 2019, aiming to increase economic opportunities and resilience of refugees in 3 geographical areas in Ethiopia. Basically Jijiga in the eastern corridor, Gambella in the western side of the country, and Dolwar in southeast peripheral regions. These are actually areas where there are significant refugee caseloads in Ethiopia. So SHARPE applies adaptive market system approach. We call it a market for resilience in order to embrace conflict sensitivity, and also because of the fact that we are also working in a very thin market in this area. So the basic assumption is that these refugees and their host communities rely on livelihood activities and informal and very small businesses actually. So even though they are engaged in such kind of businesses, we still felt that they are still viable economic actors to work with as local private actors in the process. So we work on several value chains ranging from agri-input market system development to fishery, poultry, energy, and solar energy and financial inclusion. So my focus is going to be on financial inclusion. So before SHARPE, before 2019 and 18, Ethiopia was reported by World Bank as one of the least banked countries in the world, with just over 35% of their the adult population owning some sort of financial services or gaining some sort of financial service. And then the number is very striking when you compare women and other marginalized people. So the financial sector in Ethiopia is also characterized by limited outreach to peripheral regions, because most of the financial service providers are actually saturated in urban areas where the economies are relatively better performing, and they are not targeting remote areas. So it's also a fact that cash is a dominant in the economy. Almost 99% of the bills were being paid by cash. So mobile money account ownership is extremely low. It was standing at 0.3% by 2017, as reported by the FinDev report by the World Bank. And still, there was a gradual increase in digital payments from 2014 to 17, which was a jump from 5% to 12%, partially because of the support by donor programs like the productive safety net programs, which are targeting digital cash transfers. Zooming into the Somali region, the formal financial account holding is really very shallow, standing at 2.3% of all adults having some formal financial account, formal in a sense commercial bank account or any form of microfinance account. In conjunction with that, also cell phone coverage or ownership is also very shallow, like only about 30% of the adults were reported to have cell phones, and out of these, only 16% of these were using mobile money in general. So we have identified certain constraints and opportunities in the market. In the left, I'm highlighting some of the critical constraints that we have identified. Number one is that deepening financial services by itself requires intensive resources. For example, if we focus on digital financial service expansion, the need to acquire technologies or rent technologies, they need to invest on agent identification, training, and branding, and also subsequent and non-stop technical backstopping, which are all cost intensive. And on top of that, target market, SHARPE's target market is actually not among the priority sectors and areas or ordinary market segment of the financial service providers, because they are, as I said earlier, very much focusing on urban areas where businesses are relatively viable and vibrant and the like. But saying so, still we have identified certain opportunities. For example, the fact that there is a strong financial service provider in the region. Basically, it was it was Somali microfinance institution by the time, but during our partnership, it has actually transited to commercial bank status. It is now called Shabele Bank. So it is one of the dominant financial service providers in the region, and it has a prior experience working on mobile money expansion with other agencies, like for 3-4 years before SHARPE. So there is also relative familiarity of the Somali community to adapt to digital payments and technologies and other parts of the country in relative terms. We have seen also a critical opportunity to develop this digital ecosystem in order to facilitate the transition from in-kind to cash transfers for the humanitarian services. So our intervention was actually focusing on improving access to digital financial services for both host and refugee populations, supporting the technology provider that is called Belcash Technology Solutions and Shabele Bank, aiming at expanding their agent network and services especially in the Jijiga area and Dolwado area. So this one is not covering Gambella because Jijiga is in the other side of the country. So we have two partners, and our targets were on developing mobile money agents, establishing a network of merchants and Bajaj drivers that can accept digital payments in the region, and also registering customers on Hello Cash platform so that they can transact with that technology and providing financial literacy. So diagrammatically, the business model looks like this. So here we see Belcash as a technology provider because by the time we have designed this intervention, the legal regime in Ethiopia actually mandates that fintechs cannot provide mobile money services by their own. Rather, they have to be affiliated with some form of financial institution, either microfinance or commercial bank. So the technology is provided by Belcash. It is providing the technology called Hello Cash and also technical backstopping for Shabele Bank. And then Shabele Bank actually identifies, selects, onboards, trains and brands agents. This is an image of an agent shop in one of the refugee camps that we are operating in shelter camps specifically. So these agents actually provide mobile money services. These are a range of services like transferring money from person to person to businesses or to government, like in the form of paying bills on behalf of the customers and the like. And these customers, they will use the platform also to pay digitally for the goods and services that they buy from merchants. Merchants are a wide range of businesses, including retail shops, pharmacies, groceries, supermarket, hair salons, and all gas stations and all those things. So in reverse, the agents earn some form of fee, they call it commission, for the services that they are rendering, and this fee is to be shared between the agent, the Shabele Bank, and the technology provider. So also the bank is onboarding and technically backstopping the merchants on one hand, so that the ecosystem is ready and fertile for Hello Cash owners to go and pay digitally whenever they need. So our value additions are the following. Number one, SHARPE has actually supported the bank in order to expand to remote refugee hosting areas with agent networks. So before SHARPE, they were all focusing on bigger towns and areas that are away from the refugee camps and their host areas. So in the camp, they have these agents operating on their behalf in the camps as well. Also facilitating access to refugee camps. This is for the bank's field team to do promotional activities in the form of campaigns, and also later on continuously going door to door and promote the product and service, as well as registering and onboarding customers, agents, and merchants. And also we have supported them in more, promoting the product more aggressively than before, so that the general awareness is better than it was. And then we have been engaging in facilitation of legal documents for potential agents because businesses need to be registered and have team numbers and what these trade licenses to become formally agents of the bank. So this was not possible for the banks before our engagement, before our involvement in engaging respective government offices like the National Refugee Agency, the UN Refugee Agency, and other local administratives like Trade Bureau and the like. So as a result of that, certain viable businesses have been selected. We have facilitated legal documents for them, and they are now operating as agents of the bank, rendering mobile money services in the camp as well as around the camps. And then the provision of liquidity loans for these agents. This is actually, we were piloting microloans with the bank to provide these Hello Cash agents without physical collateral. Basically, the refugee businesses, they do not have physical collateral to pledge because they don't have any buildings. They are in camps, in settlements and the like. So because of the trust and creditworthiness that have been created between the bank and it is this agent, now they are providing them liquidity loans without any physical collaterals. When we talk about the results as of 30th of November, we have this partnership has managed to onboard 270 mobile money agents. 32 of these are in Thai refugee camps. Over 2,200 merchant and Bajaj drivers are also actively engaging in operating in the area. 92 of these are refugees. Over 72,000 customers were also registered on this platform. Nearly 13,000 of these are refugees. And close to, over 23 million pound transactions have been conducted. And our regular monitoring surveys have revealed that most of the time the customers, they mentioned that this mobile money service has created unlimited access to them because unlike conventional bank accounts, they can access the mobile banking services anytime they need, 24/7. And also it is more safe for them than carrying digital, the paper cash as before, especially in those rural areas where they cannot take their daily sales to branch offices and the like. So they just take to agent shops and then convert that to digital cash and the like. And convenience for transactions, we have learned that several businesses that are buying from their vendors, they can simply transfer to their vendors through Hello Cash from where they are, and then they can expect the shipment of goods and goods from their vendors. In the process, they have been saving time, cost, and the like. So finally, we have documented key lessons during this partnership. What we have learned is that there are key documentation problems. This is not only for refugees, but also for the host communities in the peripheral regions, especially in the Somali region. It may be strange, but it is a reality that having Gambella IDs or national IDs is really one of luxury items in those areas. And as identification cards are one of the critical know your customer requirement to become mobile money users or agents or whatever. So this is one of the hindering factors. And there is also this low literacy level in the community in general and among women particularly. So there is also wrong perceptions, both among the wider community and the refugees. The wider community, they feel that mobile banking is, after all, it is banking activity, a service, and it is meant for the rich. As they are poor, in quotation, in fact, it is not something that is meant for them, which is actually contrary to the basic economic theory that saving begins with pennies, not thousands and millions. So also there is a perception problem among refugees that some of them, honestly, they don't know that they are eligible to become users of mobile money because simply they are not Ethiopians. But others have also fear and wrong perception that if they are onboarded as agents by giving their fingerprints to get tax identification number, trade licenses, and the like. This will, at the end of the day, restrict their chance of relocating to other countries, which are all actually wrong. So because of this, we are working with the Shabelle Bank, the financial service provider, to create awareness among the larger, wider community of refugees, like, for example, by erecting billboards like this one, messaging with content focusing more on refugee-centered messages, like refugees can get ID, can register on Hello Cash by using simply their refugee IDs and the like. So refugees are also target markets. Phone SIM card ownership is a problem in most rural areas, and especially in those peripheral regions, and limited uptake by refugees and women. In fact, when you talk about women, the data that we are capturing from the partner reveals that the participation of women is restricted to below 30%. But the reality is that most of the time, especially in the refugee communities, usually there are one SIM, one phone per household, and that is basically registered by the male household leader. And at the end of registration, they register that by the owner of the SIM card, and then it comes as a male user and the like. But actually, we know that most of the time, several or multiple users are behind one registered SIM or one registered Hello Cash account and the like. So when you say we have registered almost, very close to 13,000 refugees on this platform, it's almost equivalent to saying that 13,000 households are now using the product or the service, like the mothers, the sisters, the daughters, they are all having access to the service and the like. So these are what we have learned so far. Maybe I will come back for questions later on. Let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Getachew. So, Alan, are you going to add something else at this point?
Yes, thank you, Howard. I am going to share I can share my slides now. I'm just checking that. Let me share my screen. It's going to be this one, the PowerPoint slideshow. Okay. Thanks. I want to thank Getachew for a great introduction to a very complex project, which is exactly what we were trying to do with SEDIL, is evaluate complex projects. And I'm going to talk about how we've tried to design an impact evaluation around that, but I'm going to start by thinking through the problem from a more broad perspective in this. And I just want to mention my co-authors on the main report will be Shalini Roy, Laura Levens, Mulugeta Tefera, Dan Gilligan, and really I should have put Fikadu Moges on here as well. He's done a lot of the work on the qualitative side. Oops, and now I have to make sure I'm in the right place. Okay, so one thing that we have here is an inherent complexity in the market systems approach. This is a really unique program in that most of the applications of a market systems approach have occurred in agriculture rather than occurring in the humanitarian setting. So, so this is really an innovative program in that perspective. SHARPE is really innovative in that perspective. The way the market systems approach works is that instead of directly intervening in a market or in agriculture, you work with specific actors that already exist in the market that can help develop it in a specific way. So the constraints could be local, or they could even be elsewhere that need to be addressed. And the idea is to continually adapt. And some of what Getachew just described as the interventions that took place were not planned at the beginning of at the beginning of SHARPE in September of 2019. They evolved as learning took place about what was needed in the area. So maybe not surprisingly, there hasn't been very much evaluation of impact evaluation on market systems development projects. So our goal is to complete one, but also to help develop a method of thinking about aspects of market systems development projects. So I want to go back to the SHARPE goals in the financial market system specifically. So one is to increase financial access in general among individuals, households, and businesses. And even if we define, financial access to more broadly than Getachew did in the statistics that we pulled from the LSMS data, it's really, really low. It's Somali region pre-SHARPE. Most countries in the 2021 Global Findex in Sub-Saharan Africa are at least around 50% and higher. So a second goal of the SHARPE program is improve refugee-host relations. So I'm going to ask the question, what steps are necessary to build up the financial services market systems in refugee hosting areas, thinking about this as a new technology, and that's where I'm going to start now. So let's think about a theory of change for a new technology that is, let's go even one step farther. Let's call it a really attractive new technology or new product. Well, what's going to happen is that actors who own the rights to the residual or profits from that new technology are going to make efforts to catalyze the adoption of that product. And then there are going to be some outcomes from that adoption. And a way of thinking about what Getachew was describing is that actually those outcomes may not line up very well with other social goals we might have. And in this case, those goals would be making sure that there's inclusivity to the access to this new technology among people like women or refugees, but we could expand that definition as well. So essentially, without some sort of intervention to identify those actors, those social goals, they're going to be left out of the outcomes of interest. And here it may even be that the catalyzation efforts that are made by these actors who are that own the rights to the residual, they actually may just lack the information that they could make money from working with these groups. And that's kind of where the market systems approach is innovative, in that if you identify those actors and find that they find that by participating in this way and targeting these different actors than they would have otherwise, they can also make money that way. Well, then there's this big win-win-win kind of circular this circular benefit to outcomes that takes place after the market systems program ends. Okay, so in broad strokes, what our evaluation strategy is to think about a difference in difference to learn about final outcomes, which can be combined with matching, if you will, if you want, and any quantifiable intermediate outcomes. So the way that we've conceived of it is that you have to consider the adaptive management and therefore what you're measuring as you're doing that. Now, our second innovation, beyond just making sure that there's good data, and unfortunately COVID kind of threw a monkey wrench into what we were doing, is to really work with projects to have evaluators work with projects to identify specific constraints that you can deal with, again, in theory, rapidly, to try to overcome those constraints with rapid reporting back to the project after the RCT is finished. Then what we see is qualitative work filling in the gaps, figuring out what mechanisms seem to work and which ones did not that were assumed, and then using the two collaboratively in something like a contribution analysis or a contributory analysis to final outcomes. And we're still working on this right now. So we're pretty far along. This is actually a good time to get some comments on parts of it, but other parts are still being worked out. So that's my generic theory. I want to think about those efforts to I want to think actually a bit about what Getachew said in terms of those efforts to catalyzation. The new product here is obviously mobile money or digital financial services. It kind of brilliantly coincides with a relaxation in regulations around mobile phone ownership in Ethiopia. That number was right, that Getachew, that was a representative number for Somali region that he cited at 30% in 2018. Our data that we just collected state it's more like 85 now. So it's a massive increase in phone ownership. Financial regulation has also been relaxed around mobile money, and it's been further relaxed since the beginning of the project, and phone companies are starting to enter the space at this point as well, which is a point we're going to make later in findings. And so then there's this effort to catalyze, and that's the work with Shabelle Bank. We're going to focus on that right now. And then the societal goals here are that we don't want women and refugees to be left behind. And that's the opportunity from the perspective of this theory of change. So we're going to look at two different, inside those intermediate outcomes, there are two decisions that are taking place. And one is a user decision to enroll in the system, and one is a user decision to then, once they've enrolled, to actually use the system. And we think of two types of constraints to that use. One is an I'd like to call an internal constraint, and we can think of that as an internal constraint to the market system. So these are more behavioral constraints that can be dealt with by a program like SHARPE. And then there are external constraints that could also bind. And those, Shabelle Bank isn't going to be able to do much about, and SHARPE isn't going to be able to do anything about them in the short term. And just thinking about those, they are like poor cell phone service, or people lack phones. We got answers like people lack money, and that's why they haven't signed up for mobile money, and that's a pretty good reason, if you ask me. And then there is literacy as well. We've worried about the e-wallet being insecure within the household, and it doesn't seem to be that much of a problem. And external economic shocks might hinder people as well. So we're going to sweep those aside and say, we need to figure out which of those are binding, but they're not going to really be something that SHARPE or Shabelle Bank is going to be able to deal with, or even Belcash Technologies. They're not going to be able to deal with those on their own. What they can deal with is things like the knowledge of the system, the ease of use, eligibility, agent or merchant availability, times when you can't access the system for some reason, ease of use, and service pricing. So those are the types of things we want to study. What we realized as we were looking at the data and did some scoping work in 2021 is that one of the challenges was that women and refugees really were signing up at lower rates and then using the system at lower rates. So we're going to design the RCTs to try to deal with that that use system. That I'm going to talk about that one today, and we're just waiting on the data on the second one, which has to do with use. I'm not going to talk about that one. So essentially, we have a theory of change. This is simplified, but and that's because I can't handle the spaghetti diagrams that some people like to come up with for theories of change. So I need everything to be really simple, so I understand it. We can kind of push through to those final outcomes, financial inclusion and improved relations. The improved relations need a few more assumptions. So here we kind of have a second theory of change diagram to make things either easier or more complicated, depending upon how you want to look at it, where we have digital financial service adoption that either increases the feasibility of mobile money transfers, which creates a need for agents, which means that there's more interactions between people, increasing inclusion, social inclusion locally, or people increase their savings, that improves investments, that starts to improve the services that are available to the wider community and increases in inclusion. So we're going to look for evidence of essentially improved income in there. Okay, so we have this, we came up with this idea, and the COVID-19 pandemic really compounded by the conflict in Ethiopia, although not in Somali region, hindered us, and we couldn't conduct a baseline. Another thing that was not ideal was the rapid RCTs didn't end up, well, actually the second one will be pretty rapid, but it ended up later than we expected or wanted it to be. And so instead we're having trouble. We aren't going to be able to run them as adaptively as we would have liked, but they are going to provide good advice, we think, to SHARPE and Shabelle Bank moving forward. And then we had, I mean, the context we're working in has challenges with sampling frames, and we dealt with that though. Okay, however, it would have been great had we had a nice sampling frame to study from in the first place. What I want to talk about now is some preliminary results on intermediate outcomes. I'm just going to really show some monitoring results, but to highlight what we're doing. I want to talk about the RCT that we ran and then some of the final outcomes, including some of the qualitative. And that's just descriptive, although I have a piece of paper, I have done some matching on that to rebalance it a little bit. I don't think we want to call it causal, but we have done something towards that. So looking at the enrollment pattern here, these are just people enrolling in the areas near the camps. And what we can see is that, there are a couple of early months that went really well, but by and large, and then some months that didn't go very well, by and large, what we see is about 1,500 people in these areas near the camps enrolling every month. This is from, that number binds from about October 2020 through to June of 2022 when this graph ends, but it's roughly the same for July, August, and September, I think. The share of those that are taking place in the Jijiga area rather than the Doloado area, so thinking about location, is that's the dotted line, and then the scale is on the right-hand side, is around, I can't see the scale because of the pictures of people, but it's about 60, on the order of 60%, and it's bouncing around quite a bit. So one thing is that we'd like to see more of the refugees, quite frankly, are in Doloado. It's about 80% of the refugees are in Doloado area. So it would be good to pick them up. We see about 70%, it's pretty stable, of the people signing up are men. And on the order of 15 to 16% of the people signing up are women every month. There's a bump in a couple of, there are a couple of bumps for refugees, but that's the pattern that we identified. Just to think about agent enrollment, we see quite a bit of, so now I'm thinking about, are the markets really developing? We see quite a bit of heterogeneity in agent performance. And it takes a while for them to start really making money. But some of them are really quite successful, and we see a larger density of big agents in most of the time in the Jijiga area than the Doloado. So Albare is by far the most successful. I picked a number so that everybody would have one, basically. So over 200 transactions by December of 2021. You see 11 of those agents in Albare, 5 in Kebir Bayab, which is the largest kind of town that a refugee camp is near. However, one of the agents had over 20,000 transactions by December 2021, and then 1 or 2 in the Doloado area. Actually, it turns out that if you look at the number of agents, most of them then were at the 200 transactions, because there weren't a lot of other agents in those areas. So we can see that already there are a bunch of signs that there's some work to be done in Doloado. And then I'm going to skip this one, actually. I'm going to skip the use for now. Okay, so we wanted to figure out a way to promote enrollment. And this was collaboratively designed. Getachew has been in more meetings with me and my team at IFPRI than he'd like to remember at this point. So has, and we've worked with Shabelle Bank and regularly on this. So what we did is we realized, we thought, our hypothesis was, well, maybe people need to hear from someone that they know. Maybe women and refugees in particular need to hear from somebody that they know, that, oh, we want to sign. We're using Hello Cash, and maybe you would want to too. So what we did is we used the data that comes into to SHARPE every month. Actually, we used it to choose 800 good customers from the administrative data. We stratified this by gender, location, and refugee status. So it's like 100. We tried to pick 100 in each of these bins. So 100 female refugees from Doloado, for instance, and 100 male hosts from the Jijiga area camps, and so on. So that's how it worked. Then we randomized them into 4 groups. One was a high incentive group. So if you referred a man or a woman, so if you're the referrer and you refer a man or a woman, you get 50 birr. And these amounts were worked through with Shabelle Bank, and they seemed to be something they thought that could potentially be used in the future. Then we had a second group, which was high incentive women, low incentive men. So that's 50 birr and 25 birr. A low incentive group, 50, 25, 25, and a no incentive group. And we were hoping that this would all identify interesting variation in signups. We ran this from August to October. And I'm just going to kind of, the results are fascinating, actually. So essentially, we first had to recontact, we had done a baseline survey, a phone survey with these, the CR, it means community referrer is how we're going to define it in the paper. We first realized we had to recontact them by phone, and we had a little bit of a hiccup on trying to recontact the control group, but we had some trouble actually even recontacting them. Then we actually had very few community referrers who made referrals. So you can see I think the number is 56 community referrers who made any referrals at all. And then a few of them, they referred people who were already customers, or they referred people and they gave a bad phone number. So there were some referrals that just didn't work when they called it into the hotline. We set up a hotline, or Shabelle Bank set up a hotline for the referrers to call into. Now that said, so from those numbers, you might think, oh, this didn't work very well. And, to some extent, we were worried about that. However, Shabelle Bank loved this thing. And for a little while, I couldn't figure out why, but, and that's a different story altogether. But it turns out that there were massive numbers of referrals that were made. 2,900 were made. And, it didn't start right at the beginning of August, but so really September, October, I forget if I have it on a slide, but there was just a ton of referrals that were taking place. And of those, so we end up with like 2,300, something like that, successful referrals across the four groups. Now, it turns out that almost all of those referrals were not almost all, the majority of those referrals were made by one refugee woman in Doloado, as you can see from the frequency, the frequency graph on the right. She made 1,675 referrals. So what we have is extreme positive deviant in a way, if you want to use that language. She figured it out and made it a business to make referrals, and she was calling and giving tons of phone numbers every day. So this actually, I don't have a slide on this, but this actually increased the share. This is noticeable in the data that Getachew was describing on signups for HelloCash. Like, you see it, like the referral program boosted signups to 2,400 and 2,300, I think, in September, October. And so I was talking to Ahmed pretty much on a weekly basis during this thing, and he was just, he was telling me how great it is and how we got to keep going and blah, 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 blah. And unfortunately, Settle is ending, or we would have found a way to adapt it. But essentially what we have here is an RCT where, our pre-analysis plan was, not very useful anymore. But the quote unquote client found it a massive success. So we have to think about how we have to think about how we think about that, I guess. Just to describe some of our qualitative findings, people feel very comfortable leaving, as Getachew described, leaving money on HelloCash. There are lots of agents in these hosting areas, and the agents we interviewed believe that HelloCash has helped increase their business, so they're really happy. And the KYC officers, which is another big part, KYC is Know Your Customer officers that were supported by Shabelle Bank, are generally seen as really helpful. Now, people our qualitative work describes some problems that people have with the system, but HelloCash, so Bellcash replaced their server in late July, I believe, and Since then, they're able to do a lot more transactions per second. It jumped by 500%, and we think that people were in our interviews describing problems they had with the reliability pre new server.
Are you coming to the end? Because we're going to
Yeah,
use a bit
right,
of time
right
after
there.
you.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, great.
There are literacy issues among older adults, and service charges are perceived as high, which we can't do much about. Well, we're talking to Shabeli Bank about. In terms of final outcomes, we have to define access to finance in our data without Hello Cash users, but we see that it's higher. We see people who are using Hello Cash saying they're more likely to have enough income for basic needs, and they are more food secure. Now, there's a massive endogeneity problem here, but if we do weight the non-users up to look like the Hello Cash users, the two on finance are still actually significant, as is the food insecurity experience scale. So take that for what you will. Those differences are still significant, and with the FIES, the lower number is better. Okay, so conclusions: we've noted clear progress in developing the financial market system near these refugee camps in Jijiga and Doloado. It's a little more so in Jijiga than in Doloado. I should have said that our RCT didn't really move the needle on refugee or women's enrollment, but it did on Doloado, because we had the super referrer in Doloado. And so we're wrapping our heads around how you make up recommendations about that, and any help with that I would be much appreciative of. And that's it. Thank you.
So I didn't say at the beginning, any audience members have any questions, you meant to put them in the Q&A box, but if you want to put them in the chat for whatever reason, just being awkward, whatever, people do like to put them in the chat, so feel free, put them in the Q&A or the chat. Alan and Get2 will monitor them and might reply in the chat in real time, or we'll try and take some at the end. But before we come to questions, we have Joe Puri, who's the Associate Vice President for Strategy and Knowledge at EFAD, who's the discussant for today. So over to you, Joe. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Howard. Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Get2, for also your comments. I actually really appreciated the context that you provided right at the beginning, and my apologies for being late. I actually thought we were starting later, so please, many apologies for that. And I'm going to shuffle my papers around because I was writing notes even as you both were speaking, so forgive me for the noise. Okay, so first, thanks very much. Congratulations. A very complex space, very complex context, and it's one of the key areas that at EFAD, we struggle with as we think about single interventions versus complex system type interventions, and clearly we want to see more of that. So I kept thinking, even as you were describing the methodology, Alan, and Get2, because we're going into more and more fragile areas, I kept thinking, well, could we start to think about using some of this in the way we are constructing our impact evaluations, and we do them as well. But the second thing that was really interesting for me, I'm just going to give you a couple of sentences of context, is that EFAD actually doesn't work so much with humanitarian situations, but we work in fragile. And Ethiopia is definitely one of those spaces. And one of the key challenges, we work in fragile spaces, but the big focus for us is not as for humanitarian interventions. What we want to look at is how can we build markets? And so when I read, whatever basic information had been provided for this seminar, which I really appreciated, I was actually quite excited because I thought, well, this is exactly what I want to be thinking about as I think about market development and market systems development. So I wanted to understand a lot more about that MSD intervention description. So I might have other questions, but I'll probably do them offline. So just at the beginning, I do want to say the other reason, other than MSD, three reasons. MSD, the fact that you're working in a fragile situation and looking at these complex interventions, And third, the fact that we are looking at market systems development was really interesting for me. But also, I pitted this against what we are finding within the impact evaluations that we're doing. So while a lot of the work that we do focuses on providing financial service access for rural people, we find actually coming from our evaluations that financial access doesn't always translate into productive investments or into things that we can say which lead to the kind of sustained market building that clearly is the objective of this evaluation. So I did want to hear a little bit more about what the overall plans for the evaluation are, because clearly this is all still very preliminary and very qualitative. But I don't know whether the slide that you skipped over, Alan, had that information, but I am keen to know what are the ultimate impacts that you will be seeing, because finally, if you really want to understand what is the impact on markets, you need to go much further than looking at financial access, right? The effectiveness of the MSD system has to be really defined then by an outcome that, frankly, I struggle a little bit to think about, well, what would that outcome look like? But I'm interested to know what you're thinking about it, as you go along. Okay, so these were meta level comments. Then again, going back to some more detailed comments. I did want to understand as to how you were thinking of the randomization strategy. So the way I understand it, again, you have two different sites, but then within the sites, depending on the referrals, you randomize individuals and then give them different interventions. But these are only two sites, right? So it's an individual randomization and it's not a clustered randomization. But the system that you're looking at is essentially a complex intervention that you're looking to build and to manage and to adaptively manage, because the interventions, the adaptive management that you refer to, is done at the level of the site. So I think I struggle to understand that. Second, I wanted to understand what were you thinking in terms of external validity. Fragile situations, each fragile situation is different. We know this, much like unhappy marriages. And so it's really important to know, to what extent do you think that this could be something that you would apply to what kind of other fragile situations? And so where would you find the thinking about external validity, if at all? And if not, that's fine too. I'm trying to also understand, related to this overall question of sustainable markets and the outcomes, and I don't know what those are. What are the more proximate outcomes that you're looking at? So I saw use of HelloCash, but beyond use and below market development, what are the other more proximate outcome level variables that you're going to be looking at as the RCT goes forward, or you're able to look at results which are related to markets? My last two comments on this is I wanted to understand the graphs a little bit more, especially in the first one where you show adoption amongst the Jijika refugees. There was a lot of variation, but then not amongst men. And again, because this is mostly monitoring data, I'm sure you've gone through it, but it would be really good to understand context. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Joe. There's also a question online that is, if I can elaborate a bit on the RCTs not being as rapid as I'd hoped. So let me take a couple of these. SHARPE is doing interventions in more than just the financial market system. we were actually hoping to run the evaluation around the financial market system and what they call the aid market system. And the reason we wanted to do that is because really a necessary condition for transferring aid, transferring transfers to refugees from what are mostly in kind right now to cash and then to mobile money would take people being on a mobile money system. And so there was the hope that, actually not even hope, there were proposals that were out to fund pilots on that, and we were going to link everything. So that was our second market that we were planning to work in and couldn't because the proposals weren't funded with reductions in aid. So that, and I think there were other things that were going on as well. So really what we're interested in is we are thinking of this part of the financial market system as developing if people are actually using the system. And only about 50% of the people who sign up for mobile money ever use it before their account goes kind of dormant. So that, that was a second thing, and that's what we've run. We've actually run a second RCT on that, but we don't have the data in. That was trying to catalyze use by giving people bonuses. And actually, Getachew and I are going to Jijiga tomorrow to try to wrangle the data out of our partner, which or get a strict timeline on when that'll happen. Okay, so that takes care of some of the questions. The external validity one is an interesting one, and essentially the way that I've been thinking about external validity is thinking about it in trying to abstract from this situation to others. And that's what I was doing at the beginning of the talk, thinking about, there's a new technology that has a strong use case. I mean, sitting here at a CGIAR campus, I know we have a lot of technologies that we come up with that don't have strong use cases, but we cling to for a while. In this case, but in this case, there is a really strong use case, and part of it is coming from the fact that in Somali region, there were some people who were using mobile money products that were developed in Somalia and in Somaliland, and so in the border areas there was a little bit of this happening already when Hello Cash came in, but by coming in kind of big, they were able to change the market a little bit. So that's the one way to think about external validity. Another way is to think about it through the context of these RCTs that we ran. And I wasn't so concerned, I guess I haven't been as concerned about external validity as, well, is it going to be cost effective for Shabelle Bank to do something like this? And I mean, my gut feeling says no, because we made all these phone calls to people to tell them about the system, and then they didn't use it. But on the other hand, if you have something simple that will pick out those positive deviants for them, they're gonna, they see these customers as a big win. So that's where I'm kind of stuck on. Okay, and then the third thing to say is that they went farther than we wanted them to, and they actually started to develop what's known as a USSD system. So that's a system that works on either a feature phone or a normal phone or a smartphone that can make referrals. So Belcash has worked that out. It just didn't quite work well enough for our trial. By the time we absolutely had to start the trial for fear of Settle coming to Washington to wring my neck or something. So that gets into what I meant by they weren't as rapid as hoped. We spent a lot of time talking. in a way, by setting up a referral system, I didn't, think through carefully enough how complex a lot of the decisions we had to make would be to keep everybody happy, the researchers happy, and SHARPE happy, and Gambella Bank happy with the way that everything was developed. And it just took a long time to work that out. Ironically, I guess Gambella Bank is still happy because they had a bump they had this big bump in enrollment. I showed the graph on the monitoring data, as you said, on enrollment, partially because it's a real, that's really a big outcome of what SHARPE was trying to do, was to really push enrollment in these refugee hosting areas, both among the hosts and the refugees. And so in a sense, yes, the numbers jump around a little bit, but really what we see is that most of the time, the majority of people signing up were in Jijiga, the Jijiga area camps. So around the Jijiga area camps. Jijiga is a bit of a city, but the camps are farther away from Jijiga. They're 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers away. Albare is actually on the border with Somaliland. And so those people, used to have to go somewhere to do their banking, and now they really don't. Although the people in Albare may have been using Somaliland mobile money to some extent, at least, once they could get phones. So we see that, and then we see that the other point of that is just that the women and refugees are a smaller share of people who are signing up every month. Now, I've done some analysis literally today using populations of the camps, and it turns out that one camp, which is Kebribea in the Jijiga area, is probably almost saturated with Hello Cash accounts. It's like 26% of adult refugees most likely have accounts already. So whereas in other camps, it's more like, the camps are 5% in the Dolo Auto area. Yeah, I hope I answered your questions. At least, go ahead.
May I just quickly do a clarificatory?
Sure.
First, so are you using adoption as your proxy for sustained market development? Is that your ultimate outcome?
I would say use is more the sustained market. Like if people are using the system, that's more that the market is developed. And then the fact that it's on both sides, right? So the other side of that market are the agents and the merchants. And we've got some data, we're also looking at and analyzing those data in the report right now. Yeah.
So one indicator is that you have an ecosystem of agents and that is there and that's relatively stable and or growing. The second is that they are using, but just having an account is not use. And of course, there's some target with respect to use that we don't know yet.
So I can tell you that 40 to 45% of people no, not 40, 45. It's around half of people use the system. There are some problems with the data on use that are in the report I shared, but not worth going into in great detail right now.
Okay. Thanks. And 26% is considered saturated. You said 26% of adult refugees.
Of refugee adults, if you think about that, if some of those people are sharing and some people really have no money, you're not going to, that's, to me, I think that's pretty high. I think that's pretty high. I could be wrong, but there are about 3.3 adults per household. So if you think about it that way, you're not going to get much higher. You could get a little higher, I guess, but not that much higher.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything at the moment?
Thank you very much, but not too much, in fact. But adoption is one. Definitely, we will. Yeah, from the very beginning, actually, as Alan was mentioning, in our market system studies at the beginning of this project, we have learned that access to finance is one of the critical bottleneck for all sectors, and we considered it as a cross-cutting sector for SHARPE. So when we were focusing on, this is only one of the interventions that we do in access to finance. We have also others, including the business loans, facilitation of business loans for local businesses and private sector actors in the region and the like. So, in fact, when it comes to the usage, our recent data actually shows that 65% of the total registrants are actively using. For our own internal consumption, we basically refer to a fixed number of usage since registration as active or non-active. So according to that, we have 65%. In fact, in the second year of our partnership, starting from the beginning of 2022, this usage rate is increasing from time to time because Shabele Bank is acting a little bit differently, promoting the product in the camps, also by sending out text messages, and they have also dedicated call centers that can provide instant technical backstopping for the users for any wrong transactions that could potentially lead to dissatisfaction and finally unsubscription from the platform and the like. So because of this responsiveness, and also because of the fact that this Shabele Bank has an immense level of trust among the community because of this wider coverage, outreach, and also the fact that this Hello Cash is almost in every corridors of the city, and also nowadays, small towns and the like. So because of that, the usage rate is basically increasing, and we are tracking that at present we have 65% active usage rate. And also as a proxy to outcome level indicators, we also consider certain other benefits of what these people are getting from that in terms of, basically many of these are qualitative, like as I said earlier, accessibility, safety, and then protection from theft and all those things and the like. So, but the wider picture is that we are developing a digital ecosystem in the region, quite in a manner that we are contributing to the development of this infrastructure to be ready for use when the humanitarian agenda of cash flow, cash first agenda may become one day a reality in the life. So in general, that is what I would like to add.
Okay, thanks, Getchu. So I had there is one more question in the chat that the Q&A not been answered yet, but I had some comments myself in a couple of areas, and let's do the easier one first. So there's a very nice systematic review published by Campbell by Ducian Tappis on cash transfers and humanitarian settings. And what's nice about it is, well, it's a Campbell review, so obviously it's nice. But what's particularly nice about it is that it looks at the transaction costs of cash transfers through different delivery mechanisms, in kind, actual cash, and digital by mobile phone. And from digital transaction costs from the point of view of the implementer and the recipient. And so that's really nice, because the costs to recipients are normally ignored in the whole A literature. And that's one of my bugbears. So the fact they take that seriously is very nice. And it's not always the case digital comes out on top in being the least cost, because the setup costs are so high. And so the marginal cost, once you've got the things set up, is low, but the setup costs are very high. So I guess that then depends as a function of coverage, because if you get large coverage, the fixed costs get spread out of a large population. If your coverage gets stuck at low rates, then fixed costs are proportionally much higher. So I would take a look at that, and you can get you just made some comments around which sort of linked to transaction costs. So if you can think about that would be very interesting in the report. I think if you want this to be adopted, then that's a key issue, of course, about setup. I see you want to come in on that, Alan.
Yeah, let me come in quickly on that. We've definitely been thinking, that's come out in our qualitative work, is that people find the transaction costs the monetary transaction costs high. The non-monetary transaction costs are much lower. I mean, Hello Cash is not the only mobile money product you see. And I think Getachew and I were in a shop in Albare town where I think they had 5 or 6 different types of mobile money, both from not just both is the wrong word, Ethiopian types, Somaliland types, and Somalia types. So you could pay in a million different ways at this shop. But we've been thinking about that in particular because there's word that M-Pesa is coming to Ethiopia, and it will be interesting to see if you have high monetary costs, what M-Pesa would do to that model. So that's something that the partners of Melcash will have to think about, or else they're going to think about for sure to make sure that they work. They continue to work. But yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we are definitely thinking about that. You're right. It does, from an implementation perspective, it's like, oh my God, we need to make these transfers by digitally. Absolutely. But you need to remember the costs on the user side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So my second point was a much larger framing point. So where this comes from is the view that it's in the class of economic interventions, humanitarian settings, which is something we're doing a new review on. And the rationale for doing those types of intervention is twofold. One is the recognition that refugee populations are there in the medium to long term, not the short term. So you don't want them sitting around there being dependent and not having their own livelihoods. You want to be able to create their own livelihoods and then survive in their new setting. But the second is recognition that you've got a host community, and the host community become very resentful if you just see lots of goodies going into the refugee camp, nothing for them. And so you invest in the economic development of the host community with the expectation that will also bring benefits to the refugee population. That's argued by Harold Bond in '86 in Imposing Aid. Everyone should read that book and haven't read it. And finally, the development community caught on to this idea 10, 12 years ago, whatever, and tried to take it seriously. Interestingly, we're saying we're doing a review of this topic, and we don't yet have this review this study in it, but the studies we have in to date, none of them actually look at outcomes for the host population. So we've got a set of, I don't know, 12 or so, 14 studies of economic intervention and humanitarian settings, but they only look at outcomes for the refugee population. So even though we've started intervention taking place, like market system development, which do try and serve the host population, actually you said, Alan, there haven't been any that we could find rigorous impact evaluations of actually benefits to the host community. And what interests me in your study is basically the business development opportunities that arise from this financial intervention. So, and you didn't directly address this, and it can come in two ways. So one is, it is a financial access intervention, so people get access, and Getchu just mentioned this, people get access to finance. So in principle, they could start businesses with access to finance. Now we know, even with microcredit, which is meant for start business development, at least half it usually goes in consumption. And from what you've been saying about shops and so on, it seems that most users are actually using it for commercial purposes, to buy and buy stuff in shops. So people in camps are using it to buy stuff in local shops. So the potential business impact comes in two ways. One is that people are more able to buy stuff locally, and so local procurement becomes easier, and that can displace in-kind transfers through the agencies. And I don't think you can probably measure that in the way your study's set up. But the other is the agents. So the majority of your agents are not refugees. I wrote the numbers down. You have there for people from the host population. So you have got this stimulation of this new business opportunity of being an agent. And are you able to say something about that economically, and the rationale? And we have it in our review as an outcome, but no studies measuring it. It's basically host attitudes toward refugees are relatively improved when they benefit economically from having refugees there. Discuss.
Yeah, I'm going to let Getachew talk about this too, but we definitely can measure on on the agent side, how they're doing in terms of volume of business and even commissions paid. So I have a bit in the report on, I think, the distribution of commissions being paid at this point already. It's a bit more monitoring-y than not monitoring-y, but the counterfactual is that there aren't going to be very many agents because we can look at the other products. So I don't think I'm not too worried about that in this case.
It's frozen. Get at you. We seem to have lost Alan. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, very briefly. Yeah, he's in Ethiopia. So basically, if it comes through this, the potential to use this platform for humanitarian cash transfers is really win-win for several partners, like stakeholders, including the humanitarian agencies, even for the agents, because their volume of transactions will increase, and eventually that will lead to more commission earnings. That is ultimately going to be shared between the bank and the technology provider as well. And then I think this will also somehow contribute to the sustainability of this particular product in the or market in the region. So so far, yeah, when it is in kind, obviously there are lots of costs involved. Procurement is also, and the fact that local procurement is quite impossible because of the low level of local production is also one other factor that can be considered. And as Howard was just saying, it's obvious that cash transfers can also contribute to local economic development by activating the local transactions and local business in general and the like. So I think Alan is back. Let me stop here.
I'm back. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go ahead, Alan. Joe wants to come in, but let's have Alan finish first.
Well, I'm not sure where you lost me, actually.
Very early on.
Very early on. Okay, what I was saying is that we actually do have data on, we have actually analyzed some of the data, at least descriptively, on agents at this point, and looking at the distribution of essentially commissions that they're making on mobile money. So we can see where they're going, and that's a piece that we have we have mixed methods evidence that we'll have in the report on that specific point. I haven't looked at business development amongst the households, but we can at least do that. I'm sort of skeptical we'll find anything there.
Right, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe?
Good.
Yeah, thanks. So Alan and Getachew, this question about you individually randomizing, but obviously a lot of the effects that you want to see are at the level of your entire site. Market, support for business, new businesses, new SMEs, whatever you want to see. And so I think that sort of has caused me this confusion about, well, what is the outcome? And if you want to see, and I actually wrote at the top of my sheet when I started to read the material was, is this an accountability sort of an evaluation, which is just to sort of understand, yeah, we did the things that we wanted to, oh, we really want to understand, well, what is the effectiveness of this MSD related intervention in terms of developing markets? If it is the latter, I'm not sure you're going to get to the answer that you want. I mean, you're not going to be able to answer the question that you want.
Well, I mean, we
including
again,
the multiplier effects, etc. Everything else.
Yeah, no, I mean that stuff. I would agree we aren't going to be able to measure very well, but or at all. But we are. I mean, we really focused on the financial market rather than focusing on, and as Getachew was mentioning, they saw it as this is sort of, if you don't have that, then all of these other markets aren't going to be able to develop. So what ideally happens is that that SHARPE is given a few more finds funding for a few more years to follow that process through. I think to these other markets that were described at least in limited fashion early on in the talk.
Okay, thanks. There is a question in the chat I
Yeah,
don't understand from Chris Porter. So about GSMA and M4H.
yeah, I don't know what M4H is actually, but we haven't, our evaluation team hasn't had any contact with GSMA. Have you, Getachew, or not much at this point?
Okay.
No.
And
Okay.
GSMA
Yeah.
is
It's the it's like it's a group that looks at mobile, basically mobile services is a good way to say it. I forget exactly what it stands for, but there are a couple of reports that we cite when we're thinking about digital finance.
so at least someone we should be targeting with the reports for
Yeah,
Sedul.
yeah,
Anyone from
that's right.
Sedul
We should make sure
comms team is on
GSMA
the
sees
call.
it.
They're not, but make sure they see the study.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, final words, Getachew.
Yeah. Well, think yeah, it was really a good lesson for us to engage in this market and see how they were reacting. And maybe for your information, we have also tried to duplicate this intervention into the other part of the country with other partners. Like the technology is the same, but with another bank, because unfortunately that Shabelle bank is not functional in the other region in Gambella. So that has resulted in a different kind of outcome as compared to the Somalis. And primarily this is one because of the diversity in the culture among the two. Gambella is quite different, Somali is different. And as I said, the Somali people are more adaptive to technologies, and they are more receptive. And we found it is a little bit different in Gambella, and also the coordination with the partners and so on and so forth. So, but overall, there is a room for expansion of this kind of intervention in the future. And as an opportunity also, the country is also moving towards liberalization of the financial market and financial institutions themselves. And also it's opening up digital payments, and also the legal framework that was governing mobile money agency banking is now revised, allowing the fintechs to be self-sufficient providers of financial services without any linkage and affiliation to financial institutions, and so on and so forth. So yeah, overall, I think this digital financial service and uptake is low, because generally we are at infant stage. We are obviously lagging behind even East Africa and in the whole sub-Saharan Africa, I would say so. But I think even though we don't have the end line and the baseline to compare and say it in black and white that this is a difference of the last 3 years and so on and so forth, we can imagine that there is a real progress, because as an example, there is now a national telecom providing which has started providing digital financial service a year ago. And obviously it is going to face a fierce competition for M-Pesa when it comes. But I think it has also its own strategic edge in terms of, because of the fact that it's government owned, and there are these preferential treatments by the government that utilities and other bills like utilities and also traffic payment, and so all these are to be channeled through that particular product, that it is actually tele-birth. So we are going to see what we are going to face, and then what the new global banks are going to provide to the scene. Yeah, let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Nalan.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the questions and the comments, and we'll be taking them into account as we, give me a little bit of work to do, and I'm more than happy to do it. And we're going to go back to frantically working on finishing this as soon as we can.
Okay, thanks. So thanks, Dr. Alan Getachew, for the presentation. Thanks to Joe for coming along and doing the comments, very useful, interesting comments. Thanks to you all for attending. And thanks again to UK8 for supporting the seminar. Thanks for Susie, as always, for setting it up and managing everything in the background so efficiently. And we hope to see you at the next SETL webinar, which I think is like tomorrow or something. Susie, can you enlighten us? It is very soon. We have two
Yes,
this
it's
week.
next week. It's on the 15th.
Okay, it's next week, but there's two very close to each other. Okay, so, and it's about?
Oh, it's from our Seeds program. I can't remember the title off the top of my head. It's on our website, settleprogram.org.
Yeah, and it's related, similar areas. We wanted to come to this one, come to the Seeds one as well next week, please.
Right.
Okay, thanks everyone. So I look forward to seeing you
Thanks,
next
Joe.
week. Bye.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.